Okay, our next presentation, entitled A History of 17th Century Manila Galleon Shipwrecks, Santa Margarita and Nuestra Señora de la Concepción, will be presented by Miss Aleck Tan. Aleck Tan is the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency Fellow in Residence with the program in Maritime Studies at East Carolina University. She obtained a Bachelor of Arts in Anthropology from Humboldt State University and recently received a Master of Arts in Maritime Studies from ECU. Aleck has experience in terrestrial and maritime archaeology, cultural resource management, geographic information systems, and DPAA missions. She has participated in projects in Saipan, Costa Rica, Belize, North Carolina, and California. Aleck's research interests include GIS and Spanish colonial history and underwater cultural heritage in the Pacific. Welcome, Aleck.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
You're clear.
Okay. Thank you for the introduction. I am very happy and very thankful to be able to participate in this virtual conference all the way from Chile, North Carolina. Today I'll be talking about two 17th century Manila galleons, Santa Margarita and Nuestra Señora de la Concepción, or Concepción, in the CNMI. This will just be a shortened version of my thesis that I completed last year at ECU. You can go to the next slide, please. For this presentation, I'll talk about the research question that I'll cover today, the methods that I used. I'll discuss the history and post-wrecking events related to the galleons, and then share results and conclusions. Next. So Marjorie Driver noted that Manila galleons facilitated the Spanish presence and colonization of the Marianas. Between 1565 and 1815, Spain's Manila galleons transported Asian goods like porcelain, spices, silks to markets in the Americas and Europe. Goods from the Americas and Europe, such as silver, sugar, and then passengers then traveled back to the Pacific. Manila galleons stopped for provisions in the Marianas on their return routes. The Manila-Acapulco galleon trade network opened up global trade and expanded Spain's empire into the Pacific. Next slide, please. So in total, only 7 Manila Galleon shipwreck sites have been identified and studied. There are 3 in the Marianas, and Nuestra Señora del Pilar de Zaragoza y Santiago is off of Guam, Santa Margarita is off of Rota, and then Concepcion is off of Saipan. So for my thesis, I just focused on the 2 that are located in the CNMI. Next slide, please. Because there's only a handful of Manila Galleon shipwreck sites located, there's a limited amount of archaeological information on Manila galleons in general. In addition, Santa Margarita and Concepcion have experienced post-wrecking impacts, which then further affect the archaeological information that we can get. So for this presentation, I'll just focus on one main research question. What roles did Santa Margarita and Concepcion play in the Manila-Acapulco galleon trade network in the Spanish colonization period during the 17th century? What can we learn from them? Next slide, please. So for my thesis, I incorporated multiple methods. I heavily relied on literature and archival research by visiting 3 different archives in the Pacific, the CNMI Historic Preservation Office archives in Saipan, Micronesian Area Research Center in University of Guam, and then I went to the National Archives of the Philippines. I consulted many primary and secondary sources, including works by many who are presenting at the conference. I also talked with local historians in Saipan, Fred Camacho, Genevieve Cabrera, and Lino Olopai. However, from speaking with them, it doesn't seem like there has been much preserved in relation to Manila galleons, unfortunately. But I consulted Dr. Jennifer McKinnon, Dr. Jason Raups, 2009 project where they collected information about Spanish heritage sites in the Marianas. I also identified key themes in post-wrecking activities. And then finally, I created an online Esri story map, or is essentially a website that preserves and shares both Indigenous and scientific knowledge from this thesis. I'll show some web pages in a bit. You can go to the next slide, please. So the first Manila galleon that we'll look at is Santa Margarita. I consulted Father Juan Pobre's only surviving account of the shipwreck of Santa Margarita, as told to him in detail by a survivor named Sancho. So the ship left the Philippines on July 13th, 1600, overloaded with a rich cargo. The ship also carried 300 people with only a few good sailors, a factor that may have contributed to its eventual demise. During its journey, Santa Margarita encountered many storms and hurricanes, which battered the ship and then led to a loss of provisions. And then by February 1601, Santa Margarita reached the Marianas, and then on February 9th, 1601, Santa Margarita anchored in Rota. Upon Santa Margarita's arrival, Chamorro people sailed towards it. Sancho shares that Chamorro people provided provisions in exchange for iron that was on the ship. Next slide, please. Because the crew had made threats upon landing on shore, and because they had committed malicious acts, Chamorro people killed about 15 to 18 of them. There's not really a specific number. Chamorro people also killed the sick and dying. On Santa Margarita's 6th day in Rota, mooring lines parted due to rot. Then the ship eventually sank. After the shipwreck, Chamorro people salvaged items, including iron, nails, weapons, and gold. They even used gold as like a form of decoration and jewelry. Spanish salvors may have recovered artillery as well. Chamorro people took remaining survivors and then distributed them throughout several villages. By doing this, the burden and then the reward for caring for them were also distributed. Eventually, most Santa Margarita survivors were picked up by other galleons that visited the islands. Spaniards and a small group of Black enslaved people refused to leave. Next slide, please. Fast forward to almost 300 years in 1904, George Fritz recorded that in the ruins of Rota, there were clavos, or nails from the shipwreck, which were used as fishing hooks and coconut oil lamps. In 1987, Treasure Salvage Company Pacific Sea Resources, or PSR, conducted an initial inspection visit in Rota, but ultimately they didn't pursue the salvage project because they didn't, because it was in a difficult environment and had been previously salvaged by Chamorro people and Spanish salvors. Therefore, they didn't think that the wreck was going to be financially viable as a project. Between 1994 and 1995, IOTA first conducted reconnaissance surveys. Between 1996 and 2006, IOTA intermittently salvaged the site. Some artifacts that they identified include an anchor, bronze sheets, gemstones, storage jar sherds, wood, glass trading beads, and ivory triptychs. IOTA operations ended in 2006 after IOTA illegally constructed 78 one-ton concrete slabs for an excavator to run across the reef. And then unfortunately, the concrete platform turned into rubble immediately upon use. And then in 2009, Dr. McKinnon and Dr. Raup conducted investigations in Rota and identified several artifacts at the Cave Museum, such as nail heads and a silver coin from the time period of Santa Margarita. They also noted that locals dumped their fish cleaning refuse in the shipwreck site to attract sharks and to ward off treasure hunters. You can go to the next slide, please. Almost 40 years after Santa Margarita wrecked on August 10th, 1638, Concepcion set sail from Cavite, Philippines to Acapulco. It's possible that the Philippine governor, Sebastian Hurtado de Corcuera y Mendoza, used the Concepcion for his and his friends' benefits and for illicit trade, possibly. According to a historical report, most goods on board Concepcion belonged to Corcuera and his close friends, with only some belonging to merchants. Some goods included gold plates, gold filigree jewelry, and 1,500 cakes of beeswax. Merchants declared the value of the cargo at 800,000 pesos when the royal inspector had valued it at 4 million pesos. And there's no ship manifest or cargo list. It was reported that the galleon, quote, contained the greatest wealth of the Philippine Islands, unquote. And claiming the large cargo as personal property, hiding the cargo, and then downplaying the real value of the cargo meant Corcuera avoided export duties and then in turn saved money. To carry the goods across the Pacific, Corcuera assigned his 20-something-year-old inexperienced nephew, Juan Francisco de Corcuera, as the general of Concepcion. Then because of a mutiny against this young general during a storm, Concepcion lost its mast and floated towards the Mariana Islands. Then on September 20th, 1638, Concepcion wrecked off of Aguingan Beach in Saipan. Upon Concepcion's wreck, Chamorro people looted and salvaged items, including gold chains, ivory, holy crucifixes, and iron. And between the 1660s and 1708, Spaniards recovered cannons, anchors, and artillery from the shipwreck. Most of Concepcion's crew and passengers died. About 40 people escaped and survived. Some survivors were killed with land stress or drowned by Chamorro people. Some were distributed throughout the villages by Chamorro people. The shipwreck, interestingly, also released cats and dogs for the first time in the Mariana Islands. Some survivors were able to travel back to the Philippines with the help of chiefs Kipuha and Taga. The chiefs had welcomed the survivors because they were previously treated well by other Spaniards. And the chiefs provided them with provisions, 2 small proas, and then 2 Chamorro people who helped guide them back to the Philippines. And then in 1640, another group traveled to the Philippines in a modified canoe. Remaining survivors were eventually picked up over the next 2 decades. Some Filipino and Spaniard survivors chose to remain in the islands and married Chamorro people. When San Vitores and the missionaries arrived in the islands in the 1660s, survivors assisted in the missionization process by acting as interpreters and informants. Next slide, please. Between 1987 and 1988, Pacific Sea Resources excavated the site. They identified artifacts including storage jars, gold jewelry, porcelain, an anchor, ship structure, hemp, and resin. They auctioned off the Concepcion collection at a Japanese company called Apex Corporation for $5 million. The CNMI government received 25% of this, which was then used to construct the NMI Museum of History and Culture in Saipan. Then afterwards, Apex Corporation struggled financially and sold the collection back to the CNMI for $1 million. Between 1992 and 1993, local beachcomber Doug Rankin recovered and sold artifacts to the Historic Preservation Office for about $2,700. Between 1995 and 1998, IOTA conducted metal detector surveys. Between 1998 and 2002, the salvage company Proa under Doug Rankin conducted an extended phase 1 survey of Aguingan Beach. Aside from these treasure salvage company activities, there were other incidents of salvage. In the 1980s, a cannon was found by construction workers. In 2005 and in 2011, HPO received collections of artifacts that were illegally acquired by teachers. And then today, locals such as beachcombers in a local hotel still have artifacts like ceramics. HPO also has a few artifacts, including a fishing hook that was possibly shaped from a nail, and the anchor that was recovered by Pacific Sea Resources. Today, porcelain shards can still be found on Aguingan Beach. The current HPO archaeologist, James Pruitt in Saipan, noted that there are still intact and broken storage jars in the reef, but further investigations into Concepcion are limited because it's located in a very dynamic environment. Today, the NMI Museum holds artifacts from Concepcion, yet not all artifacts are on display. Next slide, please. After looking at the history and post-wrecking impacts of the 2 shipwrecks, I identified 3 key themes about salvage immediately after the shipwrecks, and then modern salvage starting in the 1980s. So after analyzing contemporary salvage, it appears that Chamorro and Spanish people had salvaged remains to repurpose them. For example, Chamorro people repurposed items such as irons and nails into fishing hooks, hatchets, and oil lamps, while the Spanish salvaged and reused artillery for defenses in the Pacific. The other two themes in modern salvage, which go hand in hand, are commercial exploitation and non-archaeological work. I did a quantitative analysis on the treasure salvage activities in their publications and concluded that they did not conduct proper archaeological work, which unfortunately did not preserve information from their projects and now limits the knowledge that we can get from the sites. Next slide, please. To preserve and share the information that I collected for my thesis, I created a story map, which is essentially a map and an image-driven website. For the story map, I ended up with 10 tabs that cover topics pulled from the history and results sections of my thesis, including on Spanish Chamorro Wars, the missionization process, Marianas as a Spanish colony. In this screenshot, the Santa Margarita tab just shares information about its history, which aren't very easily accessible to the public from literature or archival documents. Next slide, please. So here's another screenshot of that web page. This one shows Spanish heritage sites in the Marianas, which Dr. McKinnon and Dr. Raup had recorded. You can click on like each pin and find more information about the example of sites, but the exact locations of the sites will remain confidential. Next slide, please. So in regard to the main research question, what was the role of Santa Margarita and Concepción in the Manila-Acapulco galleon trade network in the Spanish colonization period during the 17th century? I think this thesis was able to consolidate information about the two sites, which hadn't been done, I think, as extensively as before. Even though these two galleons have been looted and treasure salvaged, we're still able to learn about from these two sites and what they can tell us about Manila galleons in general. We're able to learn the extent of the corruption and the illicit trade activities that was documented in literature, but not as much in archaeology. We also learned that how Spanish and Chamorro people repurposed or reused items. In addition, the shipwrecks reveal information regarding kind of the developing relationships between the Chamorro people and the Spaniards in the early 17th century. When Santa Margarita wrecked in 1601, Chamorro people didn't really help the survivors as much. However, when Concepcion wrecked in 1638, they were a little bit more willing to help get them back home. Of course, this relationship changes in the later half of the 17th century with the Spanish colonization of the Marianas. And then finally, we learn how local communities interact with the sites and then may limit access or knowledge about them. We can see how locals may view the sites as part of their shared heritage to protect and to take care of. Next slide, please. In terms of future research, I'm planning on publishing journal articles based on my thesis research. Ideally, in the future, archaeologists working in collaboration with local and Indigenous communities should return to the sites to properly preserve any surviving information using archaeological methods. Otherwise, information on the two shipwrecks would be limited to literature, archival documents, and non-ethical and non-archaeological projects. I just wanted to say thank you to those who helped with this research, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Aleck. Thank you very much for your presentation. You know, unfortunately, we're near the end time of 11:30, but I'd like to give you a couple of questions. Those in the audience, please stick around just for a couple minutes. So Aleck, a question from Laura Souter. Did any of the records you reviewed cite a reference for how the indigenous people called themselves? You referenced Chamorros, but I'm interested in a name they may have used to refer to themselves.
Yeah, so the primary sources that I accessed were mostly from the Spanish perspective. So I think they just referred to them as Chamorro people, but I don't think that I found anything by Chamorro people and how they reference themselves.
Okay. All right. Next question. Let's see. 2 Chamorro proas were used by Esteban Ramos and 17 survivors to sail from Guam to the Philippines after the wreck of the Spanish galleon Concepción in Saipan. Did you find any documentation that the Chamorro proas were returned to the Mariana Islands?
Yes, so I did find about Esteban Ramos, but I did not find anything about them returning the proas.
Okay. All right. And Vanessa Duenas wants to know how we can access your story map.
Yes, so I think I just posted it.
Oh, yes, I see it right here. https://ecu.maps. That's the one. All right. Thank
Yes,
you
so you
very
can.
much for that. Okay. Last question from Bill Jeffrey. IOTA recovered some beautiful ivory sculptures and inscriptions from Santa Margarita and are now said to be located in a private collection in Seattle. Have you ever followed up with the salvagers about recording the ivories?
The ivory is in the private collection.
Yes.
So I have not. I think might do that in the next step. So when I'm researching for the journal articles, I think that would be a good thing to do to follow up with them.
Okay. All right. Okay, maybe one more question, Aleck. Is our one just popped up? One more from Noah. Question: what is the present status of IOTA in reactivating excavation on both Margarita and Conception? And do you know when will the agreement be expired between the CNMI government and IOTA?
So I think that IOTA's salvage agreement, I think it expired in the early 2000s. I'm not sure if they are planning on conducting further work, but I did find a letter from 2016 from their one of their archaeologists, kind of like wanting to continue their work.
Right, so there is a possibility then.
Yes, so there is a possibility, but I don't know the extent.
All right. All right. Well, thank you very much, Aleck, for your presentation and for joining us this morning on Guam. And to everyone in the audience today, thank you for tuning in to the Marianas History Conference and this particular panel to start your Sunday off. We appreciate your presence, your poignant questions, and the responses from our panelists. Very insightful, very exciting. I think you've excited a lot of people today. And so they'll start their week off wonderfully. But again, thank you to all. And if Dr. Madrid has any words, I will be signing off shortly.